People always ask how I balance my family life with 400 shows a year. I'm just doing what I love with the people I love. It's my magic life.
I like Wes Iseli. I like everything about him.
All right. Today's episode is something I've been looking forward to for a long time. I've grown up being in love with his parents. We'll get into more of that in a second. But this guy has TV credits dating back to when he was 6 years old. I don't know any other magicians that have credits dating back that far. He currently performs from intimate gatherings to 50,000 seat arenas. He's performed in every continent in the world, I think, except for Africa. This guy is a legend in magic. He's got a magic legacy with his family involved. And this is just, I'm so excited to get pumped up. Everybody, it's Greg Wilson. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Hi there. Hey there. Thank you so much for having me here.
Dude, I can't tell you how much that I've loved your parents. I was thinking today as I was doing errands that I knew I was having you on here today, feeding the animals and burning trash out back. And it was like, this guy, his family, I still do library shows. And every library I go to, they say, what book do you recommend? The Mark Wilson Course of Magic, man. That's, everybody says Tarbell, but for a beginner, it's got advanced stuff and beginner stuff, and it's got something for everybody in it. And that's the #1 book. How many books have been written on magic? Thousands. How many books do I promote at library shows? Just one. The Mark Wilson Course of Magic.
And Dad was very conscientious about making sure that it was easy to learn from without any prior knowledge to magic. So he never says in that book, use your favorite method.
Right.
He always explains what a double lift is or what another magic move that you might need for a certain effect. And he usually teaches those before he teaches the effects. That's the order of the book.
Well, I told you, we talked last night for, I don't know, an hour and a half. I had a blast. I went to bed. I was all giddy. That's why this intro was so bad. I'm like, there's so much to talk about. We're not going to have enough time. This is only an hour podcast. Listen, your mom and dad, legends in magic. You, pretty daggone legendary yourself, but I don't know much about you. I only know about your parents. I ask people, hey, can you send me your bio? Can you send me your website? This dude sent me a 13-page bio. And then he's like, well, you just go for the other one. The other one's only 4 pages. And that you can just verify from that. Dude, you're a worker. I love it. Great. This is awesome. It's easy for people to say, oh, he's just, living on his mom and dad's coattails. I mean, how many times did people hear that from Blackstone? Blackstone Jr. And
exactly.
And now everybody talks about Blackstone Jr., how legendary he is. So, dude, I love it. I love it. I love it. What is your first memory of magic? What was your first you grew up in a magic household. What's your first memory?
Well, obviously, Mom and Dad were working since I was born. So it was not really so much that I discovered my parents were magicians. But the first memory is a good question because one night they woke me up because they were going to be on TV. And back then, we didn't have VHS even yet. So there were no recordings. So if you missed it live, then you missed it. And they were going to be on The Tonight Show. So it was late at night. It was hosted by Johnny Carson. Oh, obviously past my bedtime. So I got up in my pajamas, walked down the hall with Mom and Dad, and sat on the end of the bed at their big California King bed in their giant bedroom for me at the time, because I was really little. I was 4 or 5 years old. And on the big TV in the bedroom, that what a treat, get to watch with Mom and Dad in my pajamas in their bedroom. And there they were doing all kinds of magic on The Tonight Show. They had a huge spot. They did an Azra. They did a Girl Without a Middle. Their dad did the thimbles. He did other magic with Johnny at the Desk. It was really quite a spectacular appearance that they made. And it was after that I said, Dad, I want to do what you do. And I started waking him up in the morning saying, Dad, teach me a trick. Teach me a trick.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
That's sweet.
Dad,
I love it.
Mom and Dad tell a story which is kind of embarrassing. that I said, after they did the thimble routine, after the whole thing was done, I said, Dad, I can do that thimble trick. Can I have a thimble, please? And I said, okay. So he got a thimble for me, and I stood at the end of the bed, and I had on little kid pajamas that had a trap door in the back.
Oh.
And I took the thimble, I put my hands behind my back, and I dropped it down the trap door, and I brought my hands forward and said, it's gone. And they said, cleverly, they said, can you bring it back? So I thought, and I went, okay. And I put my hands behind my back, and I reached down the trap door and down my pant leg, bending over, found the darn thing and brought it. Here it is, ta-da.
Wow. Were you like 16 or were you still 5? That's awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah. And
How did
so
your parents-
when
Go ahead. No, I don't want to cut you off.
so when I was bugging Dad to teach me a real trick, because I had the Dennis the Menace magic kit, I had a lot of little magic kits, but I wanted to learn something real, and I wanted to learn the billiard balls. And so he thought, fine, I'll fix this kid. I'll teach him something hard. And they started that morning. He taught me the beginning of a billiard ball routine, and so I practiced all day long with Mom. And so she was my real teacher. And then when Dad came back from his office, because he had a magic production company, when he came back home, I showed him what I'd been practicing, and he approved, and he taught me the rest of the routine.
Wow. How old were you when you first did billiard balls on television?
On TV, I was 6, but I first did it live at the TAOM convention. I think I was just 5 turning 6.
Wow. Did you ever see
That's awesome.
that act with the father and son doing it together?
No.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It makes my heart melt, being an entertainer with a family on the road. So beautiful. I love it, man.
Sure.
That's awesome. Just some history about your parents before we get more into you. How did your parents meet?
They met at a New Year's Eve party. It's interesting now. I've heard the classic story forever, but I've learned more details recently. Apparently, my father had been spying on my mother. She was a flight attendant, and she would go with her other flight attendants to this. It was called a honky tonk club, which was a piano that played with the little tin kind of sound, honky tonk piano, and jazz music. And neither were drinkers, but they would go there for the music and have fun. And my dad was in a fraternity at SMU College, and Mom was flying for American Airlines. So every time they overnighted, Dad would spot her there at the club. And then they organized a New Year's Eve party through the fraternity with the flight attendants, because one of the frat brothers knew a flight attendant. And so they organized this big New Year's Eve party. Mom was with her date. Dad was with his date. But when it came time for New Year's, somehow Dad discovered Mom next to him, and they kissed on New Year's Eve, and that was it.
Wow. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Mom tells the story that she went back to the dorm apartments that the stewardesses shared, because they were based there in Dallas, and called her other boyfriends, plural, and told them she was engaged. Dad didn't know that yet.
Wow.
She just knew. When you know, you know. Yeah.
She
Oh,
knew.
that's so
Yep.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So your older brother, did he ever do magic on television, Mike?
Yes, he did. He was the little kid on the shows, the local television shows they did in Dallas and other surrounding areas, Fort Worth and Houston and whatnot. And then he came to LA with them, of course, because he's a kid, and joined them on the Magic Line of Alakazam. But those experiences were not what my brother really wanted to do with his life. And so after Alakazam, he didn't really go back to the magic shows at all, except when we would do a touring show. And of course, when you have an opportunity to go to China or wherever, why not go with Mom and Dad? So he joined us on those things.
So what was it like? What was a normal day like for you guys? I mean, was your dad always on the road? Did he always take the family with him? You said the production company, but was it a 9 to 5 type thing for your dad? Or was when he was home, or when he was away, he was away?
That's a very good question. Dad traveled a lot. He was always selling. My father was a heavy duty performer before I was born. He, they did a weekly television show. Heck, that's all you do in your life is getting ready for the show, shoot it, and get ready for the next one. And then in the summertime, they would go out and do fair dates to try and make enough money to pay for doing the next season or pay for the previous season. And the one, so it's a very interesting question, but it has a long answer. The Magic Land of Alakazam was self-produced by my father. The first 2 years were sponsored by Kellogg's, but then the cereal that was the sponsor of the show, the Kellogg's product that was the lead item that was the sponsor for the show, was canceled. The product was canceled, and hence everything tied to the product ended, including Alakazam, the money for Alakazam. Then immediately, Dad had to go out and find other sponsors to promote the show. And he was able to keep the show alive for another 3 years. It's amazing. And he moved the show from CBS to ABC. It never went off the air in that transition. It was on CBS one Saturday, and the next Saturday it was on ABC. So they worked really hard. Yeah, you all know because you do so many shows how difficult that is. And raising, they just had one son at the time. So unlike David Copperfield or Doug Henning, who had major sponsors that paid for everything, they made $5,000 an episode. The union costs for the studio were over $5,000. And then you've got to buy the magic, and you've got to pay the salary to all the performers, and you have to pay residuals and all that. So it was a very expensive project to produce and create the Magic Land of Alakazam. They lost a lot of money. Yeah.
Wow.
You never think
So
that.
no.
Yeah.
So when I came along, that was from 1960 to 64. I was born in 65. That transition from 64 to 65, Dad had the show at the New York World's Fair that he produced called The Hall of Magic. And The Hall of Magic, he did not personally appear in, except for some rare occasions. He created it, and he did the voiceover hosting the whole show, but there were other actors and magicians that played the part of the magician that did the however many shows they did every day. Yeah.
That's a good way of doing it, especially at a county fair. It's a grind, man.
Yeah, well,
And with the
because
world-
he did all those.
Yeah, go ahead.
He did all those fair dates at the Texas State Fair, and then all over the New York State Fair. So many of them. So when I was born, he had figured out this formula to produce shows that other people performed in, and he could still have his name on it and still make money from it. So they started doing amusement park shows, and they had other things called, he had another company called Magical Attractions, which were magic themed devices that appeared in trade shows, like the Robot Girl. Most of them were sci-fi themed. So there was the Robot Girl, the hand machine, the super amazing hand machine, the Man from Mars, Cinillusion was a film interactive thing. They were big productions and small productions, and they would go in and work the trade show. And as a matter of fact, he had offices in Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And he had tractor trailer semis with the show contents traveling all over the country all the time. And then he had another show called the Gray Bar Tour, which starred Alan Wakeling, was the lead magician in that. And that was one where they had a motorhome that towed a trailer, and the trailer was custom made so that the illusions didn't have to go into crates. They could just wheel into the trailer and plug into their padded storage space to move to the next city.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what
And,
we've started doing. Instead of building those illusions in every place and unpacking those crates, we just roll them on, roll them off. It saves so much time.
Yeah.
They can get beat
yeah.
up, but it's worth it.
So as I grew up, Dad had a production company, and they were producing all these kinds of attractions. And when Dad moved out of that office that was around from mid 60s until 70-ish, 72, that became John Gaughan's shop, because John Gaughan worked for my dad for all those years from Dallas on. And then finally, when Magical Attractions went away, when Dad changed his mind and wanted to do something else, he gave that shop to John and moved all the Magic Illusions into the house. So everything came out of the warehouses and into the backyard and under the front patio, and in the whole office contents were throughout the house. So I had a childhood of climbing on and off magic crates and getting in trouble riding my tricycle around them.
Wow.
Sounds familiar, having illusions crammed in your house.
Yeah, our old house, you have to walk sideways to get to the laundry. It was pretty bad. I was buying magic, but we had no room for it. But when you get a deal on a product that's a $10,000 illusion, you can get it for $1,500. I'm buying it. Well, where are you going to put it? On top of the other one, right there. That's all.
That's right. Yeah, sure.
I got to. She's over here nodding.
Yep.
She gets it.
Yeah.
So then in about the mid 70s, the Magic Circus shows were sold to Pillsbury. He'd been working with Pillsbury on other projects prior to that, with Keebler, which is a Pillsbury product, the Keebler Elves, and Funny Face, which was a drink mix at the time. And then came finally the final big product was the Magic Circus television specials. And they were the first full color Magic television specials, and that's what I got to appear on as a little kid.
Now, I know the Kellogg's, I know the Keebler Elves, I know Pillsbury, I don't know the Fizz, and I did not know that your dad had that connection with John Gaughan. John Gaughan's one of the most amazing builders. You showed me a desk last night, the one that you're at now, and said, John Gaughan built that. What? But now it makes sense. John Gaughan was right there with you guys. Pretty awesome. Wow.
My mother would take him to high school, and not when she was going to high school, but when he was going to high school. And then she'd pick him up and bring him back to the house or to the apartment, and he would help put magic kits together as a kid, and he'd go help build props for the local show at the grocery store, at the 7-Eleven, and then or the mall, wherever. And then he started to get a little bit involved with the prop building. Then he came, as soon as he finished high school, he came to LA to work as a runner, a gopher delivery person on Magic Line of Alakazam, and discovered how much he enjoyed building. Most all of the Magic Illusions were being built by Carl Owen of Owen's Magic, because he was still around then. So John got to learn from Carl Owen himself. Thayer was gone, but Owens was around. And John went to design university, furniture and architectural design, got his degree in that. And many of the things that he made during that time at college, I have here that he gave to Dad. Some of the little pieces that were art projects for school. It's kind of fun.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. I took you on a tangent with John Gaughan, though. Where were you going with the Magic Circus? How many years did that run?
There were 6 Magic Circus episodes. They shot them 2 at a time. So I think it was about 3 years of production on that. And that's when Dad moved into a new office building on Chandler Boulevard in North Hollywood, California. And he was there for many years. And that's where he produced the amusement park shows. So most of my childhood was my father going to his office, which was a big building. It was a 10,000 square foot building with a long hallway and all these individual offices as you go down the hallway. And on the other side of the hallway was the warehouse. And the warehouse was full of Alakazam and Magic Circus and the hand machines and all this stuff left over from the Magical Productions days or Magical Attractions days. And then, of course, the new stuff that was being built for the amusement parks. So we'd have 6 zigzags. We'd have multiple crystal boxes. We'd have, I forget how many stacks of boxes we had. but he would design a show for a park, and then he'd kind of clone it and then personalize it for the next park. And so John Gahn would build another whole set of props for that next park. And then they would come back to the office in between shows. And by the time that, from when Dad first started at a local Busch Gardens Park in Los Angeles, here in the Valley, until his last big park show, which was for Legoland, he covered almost every amusement park in the United States and many in Canada and some overseas, including Disneyland and Walt Disney World.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
He created the first, I'm a little bit proud. He created the first character show for Disney that they ever had. The first time Mickey appeared on stage dancing and doing anything was a show Dad created in the early days of Disneyland.
That is really cool. You should be proud. That's awesome.
And it's
piece of history right there.
Here's how small the world is. They had to have somebody that could go inside the magic props. And one of the only Disney characters really at that time was Alice from Alice in Wonderland, that had a costume that could get into a sawing in half, or, into a crystal box, right? So Alice was the victim assistant, and then Mickey and Goofy and Pluto did all the other work. They didn't have any other assistants, no other humans on stage. And the lady that played Alice fell in love with a Jungle Cruise ride operator, one of the guys that gave the tour on the Jungle Cruise. And he later became an attorney. They got married, and them for starting Magic Island and later Wizards at Universal Studios.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
That's a small world.
It's a small world. That's right. Daggone.
Yeah.
Tell everybody their first names.
Whose?
Alice and the attorney.
I've forgotten their names. I'm sorry. That's one of the problems with getting older.
It's not Steve, is it? What's his name? Scott? It's not Scott Wells.
No. Scott Wells was the entertainment director.
Okay.
I'm talking about the owners, the financial backing behind it. I never got to meet them the entire time I worked at Universal Studios, because I was there from the beginning to the end of Wizards, and I never got to meet them. Sad.
Wow, that's crazy, man. So
you were asking me what it was like growing up. Dad would go to work, which was at a magic office with all these magicians and tricks and people. And so I loved to go to the office. And he would work there late at night. And Mom and I and my brother would be sitting at home waiting for Dad to come home to have dinner. And she'd call him on the phone and say, "Honey, you're on your way." And Dad, at that time, that was long before cell phones, but he had a radio phone in his car. And so he could talk on his way. He could give us a call. "I'm on my way, honey."
Wow.
That's cool.
So at what timeline, is it after Magic Circus that he did the Magician television show with Bill Bixby?
Yes. So the popularity and the image that my father created of what a magician looks like changed from the way it had historically been prior to that. So before Alakazam, it was black and red, Blackstone, Thurston, Keller, that kind of look. The Magic Line of Alakazam brought it into the next phase of the image of magic with the gray tails. And then Magic Circus took them out of the tails and out of that kind of tux and into bright colored red, gold, and blue velvet coats and these exotic fabrics, beautiful stuff. And my mother's costumes were very bright orange and with chiffons and camelot and eyelash. Some of those fabrics they don't make anymore. But I remember going and buying them with Mom. And so that whole look of the magician and my dad's hairstyle is what inspired the producers of the Magician series to hire Bill Bixby. and designed his costume to not be Tails as the magician character, but to be that shortcut Eton with his jumpsuit. And that costume then was given to my dad, and they made some for me at the end of the Magician series. And so that became the next phase of my father's image as a magician. And that was before Doug Henning.
He said he's in a couple episodes of The Magician.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my SAG card doing that.
Oh,
Screen actors
How
Guild.
awesome is that? As a 7-year-old, right? How old were you at that point?
I was still little, probably six or seven, really little.
wow.
I remember, I don't know if you know Bill Bixby's performing history prior to The Magician, but he was on My Favorite Martian and The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which was a wonderful show. And I remember watching that as a little guy growing up. So when one of the days that Bill Bixby was walking me, it was one of the rare opportunities I got to actually walk with Bill Bixby back to where I was kept as a kid with the welfare worker in my little schoolroom. He walked me back to that dressing room, and I said, "Bill, is Eddie a nice guy?" And he said, "Yeah, Eddie's grown up now, and he has a punk band."
Wow. That's awesome. I just imagine in real life, I know him from The Incredible Hulk and the Magician, but Courtship of Eddie's Father, that's way before my time. It never came on Nick at Night, so I don't know it. But man, I just imagine him as the magician character off stage. He just seemed like he was just a cool dude all the time. Maybe not magic.
He was playing, yeah. He was himself. Yes. He was genuinely a nice person.
Like I can see Bill Bixby playing Iron Man. Like he could fit that character great. It's just
sure.
Golly, he's so cool.
Well, he was the Hulk.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
He was David Banner. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got to work with him on the Hulk with Ray Walston, who played the Martian in My Favorite Martian. That was really neat. That was a fun episode.
Well, I don't know about this. What was that episode?
There's one where David Banner had a friend who was a magician. It was an older retired magician, I believe, and he that was played by Ray Walston. And so Ray, the character, called David Banner to help him, assist him in the show because he was older and needed help. And so Bill got into the water tank illusion instead of Ray, and I forget why in the plot line, but that's when Bill, as they would say in the writing room, hulked out and became the Hulk, and they broke free in the water tank. So I got to be on set and help teach magic, and that was fun.
Wow, that is awesome. Golly, Greg, you have lived an amazing life, man. Wow. So this might come off, I love you, I love your family. We talked for hours last night, so I'm going to try to word this without insulting you.
Uh-oh.
No, because this is a weird sentence, and I'm just
trying
I'm trying to get my verbiage out.
We're in a safe place. You're okay. It's a safe place.
I have said in the past that I blame your parents for this, and tell me what you think. But you have performed in China. Your mom and dad have performed in China. Magic is, I say, worshipped over there. You are a rock star. You are the Beatles when you perform over there. Over here, we can do a corporate show. We can do a full evening illusion show for adults only. Mm-hmm. And when people shake our hand at nighttime, man, my kid would have loved that.
Mm-hmm.
I blame your mom and dad for that because Magic Land of Alakazam, they were doing illusions. They were doing small stuff. They had the kids. They had the clown. That's the only thing I can wrap my head why people have that connection of magic and kids. Tell me I'm wrong. What do you think that is?
I think it goes back deeper and further than that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think my parents were capitalizing on the image of magic as entertainment for children because they couldn't sell a nighttime show. Rebo the Clown came as a vehicle to have another character in the show besides my mother that could help out with the magic. So that was a nice solution to a problem. And then Rebo actually started in Dallas before Alakazam. then when Dad was trying to sell Alakazam, it was a very hard sell. Nobody wanted to produce a magic show for television because they truly believed that the audience would not believe the magic on television. And that's why Dad came up with the 3 rules for magic on television, which are always have a live audience, never cut the camera during an effect, so you never have an edit, and always tell the home audience that you're doing the first 2 things, so they know there's a live audience that's seeing exactly the same thing that you're seeing at home, and we won't edit during the magic. So many of those rules have been broken now, such as the David Copperfield's main justification for doing some of the magic that he did, which was phenomenal and catapulted him to fame, was he defined the proscenium of the theater as the television screen, as opposed to my dad, who came from theater where it was the stage proscenium and that there was just a camera shooting. So stuff that happened outside of frame was a different rule for David and for my dad.
And then Chris Angel took it to a whole other level. and
Dad was introducing an award at the Magic Castle, the Academy of Magical Arts Award ceremony one time, and he came out and he said, Chris Angel was supposed to be here to present this award for you here today, but unfortunately he's still in the editing room.
That's great. That's great. Oh man. Oh wow. All right. So like I said, I mean, how far are we into this podcast already?
About 30 minutes.
And I feel like, yeah, it's flying, man. There's so much to talk about. So I don't know, where do you want to go from here? So we've talked about the magic, talk about the Wilson Entertainment Group, that this whole umbrella organization that you guys have. I mean, you're in your dad's warehouse right now.
So as I grew up, kind of dovetailing from where we were, one of the things my mother always said to Dad was, if you would just stick with one project, we could become very famous at that thing. And my father had so many ideas. He was always creating something new. Right up until he passed away, he was creating new things. A little tangent. A couple of years before he passed away, my brother was out visiting. We're all sitting here in the office, and he said, "Oh, come on, we all." This was before COVID. He says, "We all have to get together here, please. I have something important we have to talk about." And we thought, "Oh my gosh, Dad's going to finally say something really meaningful and heavy duty for the family." So we all got together, and he said, "I've got this new idea for a show."
That's awesome.
So he was always being creative. And what happened was, as soon as he would get something going, like the amusement park shows, so they're rolling, and he's got this relationship with Pillsbury, which dovetailed into a relationship with Burger King and became the whole fire safety program for Burger King, which were puppet shows, and had a magician that would come out and talk about fire safety with the kids, stop, drop, and roll, and all this stuff that was big back in the 70s. And that was helping to pay the bills. And then that dovetailed into the change of the Burger King character, because back then the Burger King character was a fat king, and they wanted to get away from that image and go with a skinnier, more Ronald McDonald style king. So Dad helped to create the marvelous magical Burger King with a costume that would be able to perform magic. And we actually helped to make the prototype Burger King costumes with the same costumer that was making Mom and Dad's costumes for other shows. I have those costumes in the warehouse. I have proof. And that project got rolling, and he had a whole team of people in that giant 10,000 square foot building I was telling you about. Had a sister building next to it that was a similar style. So they rented that, and they had 20,000 square feet of magic production facility. So he had all these shows going on in amusement parks, Burger King shows traveling across the country with a whole Burger King program where they would train actors to play the Burger King, and they had the whole makeup that they had to put on and all of the support material that goes with that. newsletters that had to be printed, all this graphic arts, all this stuff. So he ended up having a graphics department. He saw that, and he had time because all these other projects are happening, and he wanted to write the book because that had been a dream of his for many years. So he focused on writing the Mark Wilson Course in Magic. So while I was in elementary school, this is after Magic Circus, I would go to bed at night. Dad would be in his office at home. We had a very nice home. I was very fortunate. And so I'd walk past that area, and he'd be sitting at the desk, making notes, rewriting all night long. And I'd get up in the morning, and he'd still be there working on stuff, because then he'd send those into the office to the secretaries that would then retype, and the graphic artist people would make new art. The whole business about making the Magic course is a huge and wonderful story. But as I grew up, I was constantly seeing my father doing these different things. And I thought to myself, I want to do one thing. I want to be a performer. And of course, I got waylaid and have the same problem he does. And I like to do too many different things. So that brings us to the Wilson Entertainment Group. I'm trying to, because I have this wonderful collection that mom and dad, it's mom's collection, but that I'm curating now, and trying to help her reduce the inventory. And I need to teach everybody about the things that my parents did, so that they understand what this stuff is and why it has value, why it's interesting and fun to have. And so I started building a series of websites. And the one that I just released is the Hall of Magic. And it's all about the New York World's Fair show, because I think that's such an amazing story. And I'll condense it as best as I can. So they're doing the Magic Land of Alakazam. They're really short on money because they're spending so much money to make the show that they don't have enough to actually pay for what they're doing. So they're going out, they're doing these fair dates, and the Kellogg's name is also tied in with the people that were involved with the New York World's Fair. Another family member was a government official, and he was somehow tied in with the fair, and somehow he knew the people at General Cigar, and somehow the people at the General Cigar Company were looking for an attraction, and it's an odd collaboration of events that happened. And so Dad was brought in to pitch a show to go into this pavilion that had no content and was going to open in about a year and a half. So they really were desperate. They needed something quick. And Dad came in with his team that had been working on the Magic Land of Alakazam. So there were creative minds that worked really well together. They had, 4 or 5 years of experience, this kind of creativity. And they made a show that was incredible. It had, the main curtain were louvered blinds, and they would project on the louvered blinds, but the louvered blinds could turn around, and they had blacklight paint on the other side. So they could instantly change it to a really cool blacklight image. And then that opened up, and there were 5 other screens that nowadays we would do as flat screen TVs, but then they had to front project with a very specialized projector that would project and keep everything in sync with the 5 different screens and not project on the people that were performing. And there were live artists that walked in front of and between these screens, and the screens, as I'll describe, are $1 million mysteries. And so for those of you that know what that means, you understand it's a very complicated construction and involved making sure that the set behind these individual screens looked correct so that you could see behind the screens, quote, quote. And the screens themselves had objects that came through them, like a giant hand with a cigar and these giant cigar boxes, and another screen that a person could float in front of, and all this incredible mechanisms. Owens Magic and John Gahn, as a young guy, worked on building all of this, and they're getting it all ready. And they've spending lots and lots of money. They don't have Disney money because Dad really wanted to get the contract. They didn't have enough money to keep the television show going. So they're really running dry and trying to keep everything rolling. And they got to the point where they've got the whole set built. They've got the contraptions that make the things come through the screens and the screens close again, and the unit to make the person levitate, which Dad actually has a patent for, and all this stuff, the $1 Million Mystery tubes, everything. It was beautiful. But they couldn't finish it. And for some reason, I've asked John Gahn many times, what happened? Why did they dump it? And I asked my dad, and he says, oh, I don't remember. And I'd asked my mom, and she said, I don't know. That was something that was happening as I was raising Mike, and I was pregnant with you. And, you know, so it had to be something with producing the film and probably running out of money. I don't know. So they had to dump that whole idea. Now Dad's got to go to General Cigar in New York, their main offices, and pitch them a whole new show that's going to open in a couple months in the New York World's Fair, in their giant pavilion for this thing they've been advertising for a year and a half now. So he goes, he's got artwork, he's got everything ready. He took a red-eye flight because, you know, as you know, you work right up until the last minute to get sales pitches ready. And he gets there and he's exhausted and he only has a few hours to sleep and he's nervous. And so he takes some sleeping pills and has a sip of some alcohol. And he's out. And Gordon Auchincloss was the man that was the go-between. He was the writer of the show, and he was responsible for bringing Mark Wilson to this. And Gordon Auchincloss was related to the Kennedy family somehow. So he's a high-class guy, and he comes to the hotel that Dad's staying at, which is right there near Central Park. It wasn't the big park hotel, but it wasn't the Essex House. I forget which one it was. Anyway, it was a few blocks down from the General Cigar headquarters. And he calls Dad's room and there's no answer, and calls and calls. And finally Dad answers. He says, okay, I'll be right down. He goes, falls back asleep. So Gordon Auchincloss comes up and knocks on the door. They bring coffee in. They get Dad up. He gets ready. And they walk through the snow to help wake Dad up to go pitch the new show to try and save the deal. And he does, and it's a success. They go ahead, they go with the change. They bring this new show in, and John Gahn ended up building, that was one of the first shows that he built all the props for. Some of the ones that had been built by Owens weren't appropriate because they were for another show, and then Dad had new ideas. Of course, he always wants to improve things. So the crystal box that was used at that show did like 10,000 shows, some huge number of shows. And when it came back from that, it was still in perfect shape, ready to go do another show. And that's where Johnny got his reputation for building indestructible, wonderful magic. And that was his testing grounds. And
Wow.
and that show became one of the 7th highest rated shows, live performance shows at the New York World's Fair against all the Disney shows and everything else.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you have, like, you can rent that movie from you on the website. What is it? Is it thehallofmagic.com?
Yes, with the word "the" in front, thehallofmagic.com. And yes, we have a video of the show. You can either buy the DVD or stream it. I have all kinds of memorabilia. If you join the free fan club, it's just a free thing, but I wanted to keep it kind of a little away from the general public. You can see the original storyboards for the original show. You can read the original script, the proposal that was written. You can see the pictures of the set that was built with these screens and all the mechanisms behind it. I found these slides that had been put in a box and stored and, not thrown away, but just never to be used again, that had been sitting there for decades. And I just think it's a treasure.
Wow,
Yeah.
It is absolutely 1,000%. Yes. And you scroll through, you zoom in on it, you might see some wine spill or some drool where he slept on the proposal the night before. Zoom in, look around, you might see some. Yeah. Dude, that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
And
It's a great story of perseverance and never giving up. And that's kind of my parents' life story, is they never gave up. They would always keep pushing, and whatever obstacles hit them, they would push through it, including me.
That's awesome. Well, dude, we have like 15 minutes left. Let's talk about you touring and what you've been up to, because you showed me some posters last night of some amazing shows that you've worked on. Let's talk about Greg. We have 15 minutes left. But you got some Greg in with the other stuff. But let's focus only on you now.
Okay, we can do another one of these later if you want.
We will. We'll get you back.
Okay. So I gave up magic and went to college and became a filmmaker, and that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to have nothing to do with magic anymore. I watched how my dad struggled, and I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a filmmaker. Of course, Dad had a show in Japan when I was graduating and taking my final exams. I'm graduating with honors in editing, and I've got a cum laude, and I did well. And I went to USC, which was very nice because Dad was able to put it on credit cards. And it wasn't as expensive then as it is now. And so he had a show in Japan, and he said, Greg, do you want to go to Japan? I said, yeah. He said, okay, well, I need you to help me in the show. Okay. And Lance Burton has an idea. I said, what's that? He says, well, you know, the Excalibur illusion, the clear trunk that we put the swords in, Mom and I trade places. Well, I want to do that, but Lance's idea is that I don't put the swords in. He thinks that you should put the swords in, Greg. And then instead of switching and put the girl in the box, magician's outside, and apparently the magician goes in the box, the girl escapes, and you open the box up and reveal the magician. So Lance's concept was have Mark Wilson appear at the end and have it a surprise, and that the magician, me, appears in the back of the theater, which makes sense because as father and son, we've been doing the show together from the beginning, and this is the finale, and it's a wonderful way to combine the two of us. So I go, okay, that's great. And we go there. It's a Yokohama Exotic Showcase, the Yes Expo 89 in Yokohama. It was a World's Fair kind of event. And the producer is doing a television special of Dad's show and with me in it. So we go to shoot a bunch of cameo appearances out in the fairgrounds, street magic. At that time, there was no street magic, so we were doing the early versions of street magic for television. Obviously, there were street performers for centuries. But so we're doing this, and all these, I looked like Michael J. Fox, and that was the time of Back to the Future. So all these Japanese high school girls thought I was Michael J. Fox doing magic and came running up and surrounding me, and they saw the TV cameras, and probably the TV crews were calling them in. And I discovered that I was much more popular with girls in Japan than I ever was in America. So I thought, magic is a much better choice than going into film because I can get a date. So when I finished that college, I thought, oh, I want to go back to Japan. So I went to Monterey Institute of International Studies and I studied Japanese language. It's where they teach the translators for the UN. And I took an intensive studies course because one of Dad's promoters in Japan that had brought us over back in '77 sold an amusement park show that I could be in. And it would be my own amusement park show. And I'd never appeared at any of Dad's amusement park shows. They were always separate. And I was too young, really, at the time. And then when I was going to college, I didn't want to have anything to do with magic. So here's an opportunity for me to go and do this show. And we shot pictures for it in a studio at USC. Got my promo shots there. And then learned Japanese, intensive studies to the time between when I finished college until we went to do the show. And that was it. I've been doing magic ever since.
That's amazing.
All to get girls.
Yep. That's it.
Did you get a girl over there?
Well, I really planned and I was very methodic about it. I loved throwing playing cards. Ricky Jay had come up, his book had come out about throwing cards. And so I printed a special card and I got a special die cut. It was a big size and heavy board, but really cheap for me to make, not bicycle cards. These were my own design. And I would throw them out into the audience. And if somebody caught the card or if they helped me out with a trick, they'd get a rose. If they came up to me in the autograph booth in the back of the audience after the show, I would go to the dollar store and buy the bundle of roses and then cut them into individual roses so I get as many as I could out of the money. And I'd staple the throwing card to it and then I'd autograph it. And that would be my way to say hi to the girls.
Wow.
And so that was my hook. And then when I came back from that, then I came back to the States, and I got back into kind of this rotation of doing corporate shows in the States and then going and doing an amusement park show at different parks in Japan, which led up to the giant show, which was for the arenas. And that was quite an experience.
What it was.
Now the arena is 50,000 people. Was that you, or was that a entourage of other magicians or other entertainers as well?
There were two magicians in the show. It was a combined Russian circus and Greg Wilson magic show. And Yuri Kukis was the Russian magician. And then the first half of the show was a mix of Russian circus acts. We had bears, we had monkeys, we had Amos Lefkovich, who did a dove act. Halfway through the tour, he switched out with Jack Goldfinger because neither of them could do the full run. So Goldfinger and Dove did the second half. Jim Piper was my best buddy at that time, and he was the comedian and played the clown, kind of ringmaster of the circus. And then I was the headliner, young American magician that closed the first half of the show. And I had a demon character. I had 20 artists in my cast. And then I used Yuri Kukis's girl dancers as the rest of my cast. I had one lead girl that was my main assistant. And then the second half of the show was Yuri Kukis and his illusions. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Golly, that's amazing. And
that was spectacular.
The posters you showed last night, what is the name of the theater that right across from Chinese Theater in LA that you were performing in?
Oh, yeah. So then fast forward many years later, after I've done the touring shows across the States with bus and truck tours and all this other stuff, shows in Australia and wherever. Finally, I get to be at home and do a theater show for Disney at the El Capitan, which is the theater that they do their main movie premieres from. And they had a full stage that they would do a live production before the movie. And traditionally, for many years, they were all produced in-house by Disney with the Disney production team and money from Kodak, because Kodak film was still being used to make movies. When the first year that I started to perform there was the last year that Kodak film was used to make movies. And that was for the Oz the Great and Powerful that Lance Burton did all the technical consulting on. Interesting how Lance and my life coincide so often. And Johnny Ace Palmer, who is the phenomenal close-up magician, was very good friends with the producers at that theater and that division of Disney. And when they were looking for an illusionist, he introduced me, which was very nice. I was up against lots of different people. I was up against the Pendragons, Rick Thomas. A lot of other people were courted to do that show. And Johnny brought me into the sales pitch there at the Disney Studios itself. He said, dress like a magician, put on your tails, bring magic. And I put together a special presentation that had a DVD with video that they projected on their screens. It was really awesome. It was a very cool pitch session. And they said, well, we want to use a magician that only uses John Gone props. And I said, well, you're lucky, because all my props, my dad's props, are all John Gone props. So they will last and run for the whole show, and they won't break. And I got the job. And
awesome.
I was very fortunate.
Very cool. Wow.
So I'm not familiar with LA, anywhere near you are. The Kodak Theater, that's not also called the El Capitan. That's not the same place, is it?
The Kodak, which is now the Dolby, which is where they do the big award shows from, is right across the street from the El Capitan.
Okay.
Next to the El Capitan is Jimmy Kimmel's studio, which was an old Masonic temple. And catty corner across is the Chinese Theater. And then just up the street from the Chinese Theater is the Magic Castle. So it's very small. You can walk. I could walk for lunch to the castle and then back to the El Capitan to do my shows in between my breaks.
Yeah, we got to the castle way early just because I wanted to figure out where it was. And then we went down to the Chinese Theater just to look around and be a tourist. And then we went back up to the castle that night. Yeah, yes, it's real close. It's real close. Dude, the hallofmagic.com, you have the DVD, you have the rental, you have all that stuff. MarkWilsonMagic.com. There's GregWilson.com. WilsonEntertainmentGroup.com is like the umbrella that has everything listed. But if
Yeah, if you
people
go to
want
Wilson
buy,
Entertainment Group,
go ahead.
if you want to, you can just remember Wilson Entertainment Group. Wilson Entertainment Group, all spelled out, .com. And that has all the links to everything else.
Oh, perfect. That makes it easy.
Yeah. So WilsonEntertainmentGroup.com. If I go there, can I get a DVD set of like Magic Land of Alakazam or the Magic Circus DVDs? How does that work?
Yes. Well, I haven't consolidated all the stores yet, so you kind of have to go to individual sites. But anything related to Mark Wilson and Nani Darnell is on MarkWilsonMagic.com. And you can get there through the Wilson Entertainment Group. And so we have Magic Circus episodes. We don't have Alakazam for sale on DVD there, but we have the other shows that Dad produced, all of his instructional DVDs, magic courses, all kinds of stuff. And then the Alakazam Archives is a whole nother project we have to talk about another time. And that's where Alakazam will be again.
Okay. Cool.
So what about you bringing Alakazam back? You got all the props, you got the original hat, you got all that stuff. Come on, man! This generation,
a dream.
This is it. Is that something you put some thought into?
Oh, many times for many years. Yes, and I've gotten this close to actually having. I had the producers that did the Power Rangers, that era, and Pee Wee Herman. That Pee Wee Herman's writer and the Power producers were on tap to create the next Magic Land of Alakazam, and then the network didn't want it.
You know, it's one of those things where it's a proven method, it's a proven thing, it's a new generation that don't know it,
right?
Dude, and then parents like me could actually enjoy watching it with their kids. It would be something, Elmo, that high pitch. And I have 2-year-olds. I can't do it. But yeah, that'd be awesome.
So like my dad said on the Carson show one time, many years later, he said, okay, if there's any producers out there that have investors that would like to do a big magic show, give me a call.
There you go. Well, we're going to promote the heck out of this, man. So that's the clip. That's the segment right there.
Yes.
Go to WilsonEntertainmentGroup.com. Let's get Magic Land of Alakazam back with Greg Wilson at the helm. That'd be awesome. That would be amazing. And if you're watching it on video, you see the Fulos trophy in the back. We didn't even get to that. We will have to have you back.
Oh.
There's a thousand more stories to go through.
Here's my original. This is the lollipop that I pulled out of my pocket when I was 6 years old on a Magic Circus.
This thing for the audio listeners, it looks
like a vanishing coin.
Oh, wow. It's a production item, but it looks like on Wizard of Oz, the Lollipop Guild. I mean, this thing is huge. There's no things fitting in his mouth, even if it's folded in thirds. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, I want an invitation. That would be something that you could do. You go to a magic convention and sell lottery tickets to have people put $5 in a hat and choose somebody to go tour his amazing warehouse, because I don't know any magicians that wouldn't want to see the tour that I saw last night. It is a phenomenal place, man. The Johnny Gone desk, all the memorabilia, all the VHS tapes, all the posters, all the props, and to hang out with you. You need to raffle it off. Let's start a 501c3 charity. Let's get it going and just raffle it off, man. We'll do tours.
Sounds good.
Once a week.
We'll do another interview and we'll talk about that.
All right. Dude, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, man, I've grown up. I thought that the little boy doing the billiard balls was your brother. I thought it was your brother. I was like, wow, your brother's awesome. No, that's me. You're awesome. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Man, I gotta tell you, it makes my heart huge to watch that video. It makes me smile every single time, especially since I've become a father. It's more emotional every time I see it. I love the love that you and your dad shared on video. And, your dad's gone now, but you will always have that. And dude, I don't know what else to say. It's just an amazing moment of television history. God bless you. Thank you for doing the podcast. Thank you so much. On our podcast group, we're going to put all these links and everything. And I think that's about it, man. We're running out of time.
Yeah.
There's only one more thing else we have to say. See you next week.
Happy magic.
Check us out online at wesisley.com and patreon.com/Wes_Isley for behind-the-scenes videos, blooper videos, never-before-seen footage, discounts on merchandise, magic trick tutorials, and more. That's Wes Iseli, spelled Wesiseli.